Almost 12 months ago, our very close friends, Paul and Angela, sent us a text, I think at some unearthly hour, saying it's on. 16 hours of surgery later, Simon, who had up until then been walking around with oxygen canisters on his back and all sorts of other... anyone who met Simon wouldn't recognise him today, I've got to say that. But 16 hours of surgery later, Simon came out of theatre having had a double lung transplant. That wouldn't have happened without you people, without donations being available. But to tell you what it's meant to Simon and how important it is to Simon, and also to another young lad who's around somewhere who I can't get my eyes on, Chris, there you are, who Chris has the responsibility for having told Simon about his experiences and convinced Simon it was about time he actually bit the bullet, let's say, and underwent the surgery, because Chris had the same surgery I think a year before. But to tell you his story is Simon Cooper, who is really a different person to the Simon Cooper that 12 months ago we would have seen here. Simon, please.
That's better. My printer ran out this morning, so I hope my iPad's going to work. Right. As a musician, well, a drummer, I'm usually stuck at the back, hidden behind the rest of the band, and now's my chance to be at the front. A year ago, I could not have done this, as I was about to go on the transplant list. I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at birth, a disease that affects the lungs, liver and pancreas. I was born with a blocked bowel, which needed major surgery at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and a third of my bowel was removed, and of course having surgery meant a lot of blood was needed. Things were not too bad until I was about 15, when it became clear that I would need a liver transplant. The holding surgery that I had every week until the liver was found needed plenty of blood, and the liver transplant itself took 10 hours on the 31st of January 1999, which also needed plenty of blood. The liver transplant enabled me to lead a normal life again as a professional musician. In early 2000, soon after my liver transplant, I became diabetic. I was at Great Ormond Street for 2 weeks, but that was not going to stop me doing a run of 14 shows. 6 o'clock every night, I was getting ready to perform a 2-hour show, only to return back to the hospital at 1 a.m. in the morning, and having been let in by the security staff. Being a drummer, keeping physically fit and strong is pretty important. I regularly play drums with Chaz and Dave, who I also happen to be a big fan of since I was very young. In 2009, my lungs were in a bad state, and I was in hospital for 2 weeks, but the doctors and nurses at Papworth Hospital kept me going, but only just. From then on, I was using oxygen 24/7 to breathe. This was becoming more and more of an issue, especially with my drumming. By January 2011, my lung capacity was 20% and getting worse. Only one bad infection would have been serious enough. At the end of the year, I played the drums at the O2 in London. After the gig, Chaz said to me, "Next time, this year, you will have your lungs and we'll do this again properly." In April 2012, I organised a charity event. Even though my lung capacity was now 16%, I was still drumming. However, I was having to hide my oxygen behind the drum kit, taking a good fix of oxygen between songs. I was aware that going on the transplant list meant I could be called at any time, so I refused to go on the list until after the gig, as I was not prepared to miss it. However, I did go on the list the next day. On the 17th of April 2012, the phone rang at 4:40 in the morning. It was Papworth Hospital. Simon. What?
August.
Okay, August. Simon, we think we have found you some new lungs. There will be an ambulance with you in 1 hour. See you soon. That was the last thing I remember until 4 days later, having my hair washed and eating jelly and ice cream. 17 hours of surgery, 10 pints of blood, 6 platelets and 4 units of plasma later, I was wheeled into intensive care, and within 4 days I was walking around the ward threatening to bring my drums in. I was in hospital for 3 weeks and made two 2 weeks, and made two very good friends, which I speak to every day, which is Chris, who's here today. And we meet up at the hospital and as often as we can. So 11 months later, I'm recovering, back gigging, and none of this would be possible without people like you. Thank you to the donor. I don't know them, but I know they'll be very pleased how things have turned out. Impossible without blood donations. Thank you from my family, and thank you from me. Your blood donations have saved my life. And by the way, Chaz was right. 120 days after my double lung transplant, I was back on stage at the O2 drumming with my new lungs. Thank you.
When I saw her face, now I'm a believer. Not a trace of doubt in my mind. I'm in love. I'm a believer. I couldn't leave her if I tried. I thought love was more or less a given thing. Seems the more I gave, the less I've got. What do you think dying? All you get is pain. When I needed sunshine, I got rain.